Welcome back to the Aesthetic Edit podcast. You guys, we're in a new space today. We actually moved the show to my home, and I am just so excited about our guest today. She has flown in all the way from Arizona. She's been in the aesthetics industry for nearly 30 years, and she is an operational excellence leader, developer of aesthetic practices. She has such incredible experience, and I can't wait for you guys to hear more about her story and learn from her. And this is Kara McClanahan. Welcome to our show.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so glad that you made it. This weekend, we actually have the MedSpa Business Accelerator. So 2-day workshop where we're going to talk to practices about how to accelerate the growth of their business. But why don't you share with the audience a little bit about how you got started with Aesthetic Practice Partners and more about what it is?
Yeah, so Aesthetic Practice Partners for me it started out as what I would say is my side hustle or passion project, because I spent the first half of my almost 30 years in aesthetics managing medical aesthetics practices. And anybody who's watching this knows there's no playbook, right? So it doesn't matter, this is such a different industry because we are medicine, we are retail, we are luxury, we are hospitality. And so there's no real playbook. So when I was learning to be a better leader myself and managing medical aesthetics practices, I was always out there looking for mentorship, a guidebook. How can I do better, scale, grow, support my teams? And when I was out there looking for resources for myself, I found that there really wasn't any. That long ago, there was not a lot of consultants in the industry. We didn't have the conferences that we have now, the resources that we have now. And when I was out there looking for that network, I was actually running across people that were kind of going through the same thing that I was going through, or really just hitting some of those stumbling blocks. And I found myself educating and sharing how I overcame some operational struggles. And so coaching or consulting was just something I did. And it evolved over the years to me also coaching and consulting with industry partners. And so APP allowed me to bring my support of medical aesthetic practices and what I was doing working in the industry with brand partners, breast implant companies, skincare companies, medical device companies together, and truly be a partner to help the industry evolve and grow together. So we are part consulting. We do strategic business consulting, operational consulting for practices, but we also do things like our MedSpa Business Accelerator, bringing practices and industry experts together really for the fundamental point of just learning, collaborating, networking, and growing, and also partnering with industry brands to help them be better supporters of the practices they're selling into. And so APP is an evolution of all of that.
Yeah. That is awesome. And it is so interesting and so needed in our space because there's so many talented providers and practices that can change these patients' lives. But when it comes to the business side of running and managing a practice, leading and developing a team, growing your revenue year over year, that's a whole different side of the brain and a whole different skill set. So your expertise is much needed in this industry, which leads me to be curious about what made you want to get into aesthetics?
So this is kind of my journey was very atypical. So it actually started out, I wanted nothing to do with aesthetics. I went to beauty school after high school because I wanted to be a hairdresser. As it turns out, I'm really bad at cutting hair. You should not let me near a pair of shears, not scissors is what they're called in that side of the industry.
Yeah.
But I could wax you all day long. I was really interested in skin going through aesthetic school. And when I finished beauty school, it was a little bit of a patch for me. My journey through aesthetic school was really dictated on my life. I mean, I had 2 kids by the time I was 20 years old. Yeah. I was kind of, grit and just really trying to get myself through beauty school. Doing that, I took a job managing a spa. Okay. And I found that I really loved the business side of aesthetics.
Yeah.
So I really shifted my career to management, and I was a provider, I was an esthetician, but I really enjoyed numbers and understanding how does this business run. And over time, it just evolved. So it evolved from the salon spa to the aesthetic space. As my career continued to grow, I also realized that I enjoy healthcare for a period period of time I worked in neurology and concierge primary care. So I was able to marry all of my passion for aesthetics and all things beauty and my, functioning side of my brain that, is very analytical and really business minded. And, it's just, my career's grown over time, but really it started with wanting to be a hairdresser, which is totally not where I ended up, right?
Yeah. Isn't that just kind of how life works though sometimes? Is you just are on this journey and you think you're going to go one direction and then you pivot this other direction and then another door opens and one door closes.
That's right.
And then you end up where you're at. I love that you got some great experience working inside of a salon and spa. What were some of the biggest lessons that you learned in that seat that led you to where you're at today, whether it's on the operations or leadership side?
Yeah. So I think that for me, I recognized very early on that experience is everything, right? There isn't one thing that happens, and this is true in any business, in any industry, that our consumer experience and the people walking in our doors, particularly in aesthetic medicine, remember they have choices. They don't have to be here, right? When I worked in neurology or primary care, our patients had to come to us, right?
Yeah.
In aesthetics, we want to. There's a lot of options. And so I learned that when you have options, you better deliver an experience. You better deliver like fine-tuned from every single touch point. And again, running a salon spa isn't any different operationally, theoretically, than running a large business and running a medical aesthetics practice. Every single thing you do is intentional. Every strategy that you have is meant to deliver an experience because you want them to come back. And for me, I break everything down to just the very granular detail of everything that we do. Everything has purpose, everything has intention, everything has strategy. And I learned that very, very early. And I think that's a big miss for operators today, is understanding how their business works.
If you're listening but not following, please just go ahead and click that follow button. It will help solidify our relationship, and it will allow us to engage with you more regularly and give you more of the advice and guidance you're looking for and how you're building your brand on social media. We can be found on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. Follow us at the Aesthetic Edit Podcast. If you have show ideas or guest recommendations for our future podcast episodes, we would love to hear from you. The patient experience is so critical, especially in today's market. Like you said, there are options, and the aesthetics industry is growing so rapidly. But patients, they're shopping through social media. They're, hearing from their friends or their family of other providers and other practices in the area. And there's always, competition that's going to be brewing. Whenever you're working with your clients, how do you approach evaluating their current patient experience, and how do you find gaps and opportunities for them to enhance that? Like, are there any main things that you look for, or anything that you've, applied to a practice that really changes everything?
Yeah, I think number one, you have to be very data driven. Right? Because analytics mean everything. And that just doesn't mean just your finances, but really, really because numbers don't lie, right? Otherwise, it's just perception. It's a feeling. It's a gut, right? So whenever we're working with new clients, we do a complete practice assessment before we even take on a client, before we even, propose a consulting partnership. We want to know what's working, what's not working, and it's a deep dive. So whenever I'm talking to practices, whenever I'm at conferences and speaking, you can do this yourself. You can deep dive into your practice, but take the emotion out of it. Look at the data, look at the analytics, really understanding. You might perceive your patient experience as X, but when you look at your conversion rates, it's very indicative of whether you're on target or maybe you're well above, or most often the case is we're well below. Our gut tells us something different than the numbers tell us. So taking a very analytical approach to looking at every single touch point in the patient experience, from that lead when it comes in, when it goes to social, what happens, when it goes to your website, what happens, when someone picks up the phone and calls you, what happens, and then follow that patient journey all the way to what happens after they've had an excellent treatment. How are you keeping them coming back into the practice? How are you getting them to refer their friends? What does that entire patient relationship life cycle look like? And really breaking it down to the fine granular detail of how do we do better?
That's really, really good. And data is everything. Knowledge is power, and you have to understand the numbers to make good decisions. And I'm really curious, just with your experience and looking at so many different aesthetic practices over these past over almost 30 years in the industry, would be Are there any patterns that you've noticed of just common misses or just common places where practices have blind spots that you could share with our audience just to kind of help encourage them to really not ignore those things or even red flags?
Yeah. I think the big thing is understanding that, especially like when revenue's high and patients are walking in the door, we forget the operational infrastructure, right? Seeing things are going well and we just think things are running smoothly. But the minute patient volume decreases, revenue decreases, we're sitting there looking around going, what happened?
Yeah.
Most often what happened is the lack of strategy and structure within the practice. Especially when we run out as providers and open new practices. We've built this persona on social. We've got an amazing website. We've got all the clinical training in the world, but we forget the structure, the strategic processes, our SOPs, understanding what it takes to actually run the business. And that's why it's so important to have the right partners in place, right? Most nurses aren't excellent at social media, right? They need a partner like your organization, right? Not everyone understands finances. It's just not how their brain works. They need a partner for that. So really understanding what you're good at, really tackling, embracing, and growing what you're good at, and realizing what you're not good at, and finding either the right partner, or maybe that means a new team member. But just making sure that you're staying in your lane with your, I learned this word from you and I've used it so many times, zone of genius, right? You understand what you're good at, but really recognizing what you're not good at and building upon that with having the right people in the organization. But to do that, you have to know what that platform looks like, what that structure looks like. And I think that is the biggest miss in every practice. We grow, we scale, but we don't always put in systems that were sustainable and really, really scalable to help our practices grow. We just keep growing on top of, right?
Right. So if I'm a practice owner and my business has blown up and then all of a sudden things slow down, how would you recommend that I go about fixing those internal processes, or maybe just building out the lack of the processes and structure that, you get so excited, you build the thing and then the thing kind of starts to slow down? Where would you recommend that?
And that's when you realize that something's missing, right? Because so if we really process mapping, every single process in your practice, really understanding, again, just even the intake form, where do I ask the right questions? When am I using this information? The consultation process, what happens here? Again, it's just process mapping everything that happens within the practice and understanding where those gaps are. So when we work with practices, we look at everything from job descriptions, and then we break the job descriptions down into tasks. If this task is on Becky's job description, is there an SOP for that task? Does she have all the tools, support, resources, and training for that task? Is there a checklist associated, right? Breaking everything down to the granular detail and understanding, and it's not as consuming as it sounds. It's not as intimidating as it sounds. You as a business owner, it helps you understand what's going on within the business anyway. And then when that injector leaves and you're trying to build a new injector, or your front desk manager decides to get married and move to Ohio, you now have a playbook on how you can just pick right up and continue with the business. And when things are slow, this is the perfect time to look within and really understand what's going on within the practice. So embrace the downtime, because when you're busy and you're going gangbusters and your schedule is full and the money's flowing, you're probably not paying attention to the things that are going to sustain that in the downtime.
Totally. That's very convicting. I feel like this is very similar to a season of business that even we're in at Social Practice, which is so funny because we're a marketing agency, but our business model is so similar to aesthetic practices. And, the operations piece for me personally, that's not my zone of genius. I'm visionary, sales, marketing, storyteller. So the back end, the SOPs, those things, I'll just be honest, it makes me want to bang my head against the wall. I don't want to do it, but I'll do it, and we're getting to a turning point here. And I'm sure a lot of our practice owners and providers can relate to that. And so once a practice gets to a certain size where they can afford to outsource or bring in help, what do you think that they should be looking for in a partner, whether it's hiring a company like yours or hiring a full-time employee to come in and support ops? Like, what does that person need to have?
So I think the practice size dictates whether you need someone internally or whether you can outsource it. So a lot of smaller practices need the expertise, they need the guidance, they need someone to actually help do the things, but they can't always, afford a real true practice manager or operational director. And when you look, a lot of practices, you look at your practice managers, if you look at them on paper or you look at them in personality, are they really like an operational expert, or are they someone that's really good at directing traffic? Right? So there's a big difference there in a traffic director, someone who's managing the processes, or someone who's owning the structural operation of your practice. And I think your need for that is determined based on where you are and where you want to be. So I think first deciding whether that's an internal person or whether that's a fractional or a support person is really important. And again, that's going to be based on where your business is. And then deciding who that right partner is. There are a lot of consultants out there. There's consultants for marketing. There's operational consultants like myself. There's financial consultants. Everybody's a consultant this day and age. So I think really understanding what you need is first and foremost. I have practices that come to me all the time. They don't need me. They need you. They need a financial expert. They don't need an operational person, but they think they need a consultant or operations because that's what they're seeing. So really understanding what you need and then where to go for that. And because there are, just like our patients have choices, there are choices in partners. You need to find someone that is really aligned with who you are culturally, that's going to help drive your business, that is as invested, not just because you're paying them a monthly fee, in your success, and that you really truly value them as a partner because it is a partnership.
No, that's really good. And there are a lot of different directions you can go, and it can be overwhelming to decide, am I going to take on the liability and the risk of a full-time salary? I'm going to open my doors to someone who's going to just come in and have access to my employees that I poured into, to my processes that I've built, if they're good or not, whether they're good or not. They're gonna have access to my patients, my book of business, or having a partner like you. Can you share a little bit more about, just with hiring a company like yours, what some of the main benefits are, and what season of business you should be in to consider your type of business versus doing the full-time option?
So I think that people have a tendency to reach out to a business coach or a consultant when they feel like something's on fire. We have a big problem, we need to try and fix it. And it's easier to grab somebody that has some expertise rather than to hire internally. I actually think that's just the opposite. So when you have so many things going on internally that you need a lot of support, that's actually probably when you need somebody internally versus externally. And then again, aligning yourself with the right person is so important. But I think that the biggest things in deciding when to do it is, don't wait for that fire. Don't wait for that emergency. Because sometimes guidance, the more proactive you can be, and guidance can set you up for success so that you don't hit that fire season, right? So that you're not then trying to figure out what to go on in a state of emergency. So most of my clients that I have today are primarily very successful, well-established. I've worked with them for 5 or greater years. They're 7- and 8-figure practices. And they're not reaching out to me because they have a problem and they need to fix it. They're reaching out to me because they know they need support and guidance and expertise. And it's an investment in their practice. And so I think that really understanding when you need something is before you need it, is when you need that support and guidance, rather than when there's an emergency. If you feel like things are so out of control that there's an emergency, that's probably where you need a really good internal operator or someone managing the fort at home.
To learn more about Aesthetic Practice Partners and to connect with our guest, Kara McClanahan, check out their website, aestheticpracticepartners.com. So in our industry, there's always new procedures, services, technologies, and there's some debate going on right now around what's compliant and what's not. And you being in consulting, I'm sure you have these conversations with your clients as well. I would love to hear just your hot take on just what's happening right now in our industry with bringing in certain services or treatments that aren't fully FDA compliant for usage in certain areas of the body.
So this is not new. This debate has been going on the treatments, the trends, those type of things change over time. You know, there was this hot debate over how neuromodulators were used off-label 15 years ago. This was as big then as we hear a lot of debate right now with things like PDGF and other things. From a industry perspective, we're always going to have people pushing the envelope. There's always going to be, this is the one industry that like whatever is trending today is probably going to be totally taboo and gone next week. But don't worry, it'll be back in 3 months because somebody else is going to come back and there's a new manufacturer, there's new products, there's all these things, right? That's one of the things that I love about this industry because it's so dynamic. From an operational perspective, and we at APP, we have attorneys on retainer. We specifically work with our partners to make sure, because my job is operational excellence. And it's one thing like how you market something. Are you marketing it to be very, very compliant? You know, you might be using products off label. You might be using products that you truly believe in. And it's not just PDGF, but there's peptides, there's, you know, again, GLP-1s that aren't going anywhere. I don't care what anybody says, like they're not going anywhere. They're finding better uses for it. I think that the same thing is going to happen with some of these particularly injectable products that might not be currently FDA cleared for certain uses. It's going to happen. But from an operational perspective, compliance is so important. New trends are not worth your license. They're not worth your livelihood. You're also risking all of your employees' livelihoods. So I think that my recommendation for practices is to be careful with jumping on trends and understand, even if you're going to use something in your practice that might be off-label and you've done your research and you feel very comfortable, you have to be comfortable that when a patient is doing a treatment that you're recommending that's off-label, you have to be comfortable backing that up, how to resolve any complications that may arrive. You have to have an SOP for it. You also have to make sure that you're prepared from a liability perspective to handle anything that may happen. You have to be careful how you're marketing services. So we have to just think about all of these things. And I'll tell you, most practices don't. There's a new trend. So-and-so is getting great results. Kim K loves it. So we're going to bring it into the practice. We're going to invest a ton of money. We're going to market the heck out of it. We know that every single patient that walks through the door is going to love it, but that's just not reality. That is the exception, not the rule, and you have to make sure your business is covered. So when these trends come about, making sure that you're prepared. If you're doing something that you know is off-label, that is your choice as a clinical provider. You have to be prepared from a liability standpoint, from an SOP standpoint, from a complication management standpoint, and marketing.
Yeah, that's really good. And what are the biggest risks of going off-label or using a product that has not been FDA cleared yet, just so that the audience is clear on all the different risks that you're going up against?
Yeah. So I'm not an attorney. I just play one on, no, I'm just kidding. So with that disclaimer, from an operational perspective, I mean, the biggest risk is a complication. So if it's not FDA cleared and it doesn't have all of the clinical studies, that means they don't know what the complications could be. We don't know. It's not been studied. Now, it may have been cleared outside of the US. Get your hands on that information. Because just because something's not cleared in the US, if it's going through clinical trials, if it's going those kind of things, hopefully it's been cleared elsewhere. And so you can get your hands on those papers. But the biggest risk is complication. You don't know what's going to happen if it hasn't been studied here. And the secondary risk is like reputation management, right? That's huge. A lot of what we're seeing out in the industry right now, I know it's been a hot topic at some of the conferences, is should you be doing something because it hasn't been FDA cleared, or should you be using something off-label? This now, because the day and age of social media, and you know this more than anybody else, is this is now a public discussion. Yeah. Every other provider that's watching at a conference, every consumer is watching your social media. Some of these injectors and physicians and surgeons and even estheticians are like quasi-insta-famous. And so we know that 30% of consumers find us on social media nowadays. That means everything you do and say is out there for your consumers. So there's a reputation management aspect as well. And again, you're risking the livelihood of your license and your business.
Yeah, it's really interesting because it's been a really hot topic the past few weeks. There was a conference in town, there was a panel, there was some debate. I'll call it healthy debate now, but I don't know if it was always so healthy. And that is social media. You know, it exposes a lot of just different opinions and thought processes and truths and lies. And it does make it really hard for the general consumer that's not working in aesthetics to know what's true and what's not true, and how to trust their providers, and how to trust the information being passed around. How do you feel social media has impacted our industry?
Hugely. So 15 years ago, I managed a plastic surgery practice. It was a mixed derm plastic surgery practice, and I had 5 plastic surgeons. And I used to love, even though I was the practice manager, I used to love sitting in for my patient care coordinator. So I got to help guide patients through their surgical journey. Patients would walk in the door and they would say, I'm unhappy with the size of my breast or how my tummy looks after kids. They would meet with the surgeon, and the surgeon would do their exam and give them their recommendations. This is what's going to help you feel back to you again. Now patients are walking in the door and they're saying, I want, 450 cc over the muscle implant. I want this brand and I want this. The same thing happens with toxin. Patients walk in the door and say, I want 65 units of toxin. I want you to put some here and then do that. We have armed consumers with information, so they're dictating their treatment plans. And this is particularly relevant to the whole discussion we were just talking about with like on-label, off-label stuff, is that patients see something now on social media. They're far more savvy. They're dictating their own treatment plans if you let them. They should not be letting them. Good providers are the ones that should be driving the treatment plan. So just because they see something on social media doesn't mean that's the treatment that's right for them. But that's what social media has done. We've put everything we do out in the forefront. Why do you think there are people at home trying to inject themselves or use micro rollers because so-and-so did it on social media? She's in the mirror injecting herself while holding her camera doing it on social media. It can't be that hard.
That's crazy.
Right? So we love social media because it allows us to show people from the outside in, come look at us and experience us before you're having to walk in the door, and really understanding that why we might be the best provider for you. But we're also now allowing patients to information that allows them to dictate their treatment plan. As providers, you can't do that. Yeah. You have to you're still a professional. This is medicine.
Yeah.
I don't care whether it's PDGF or radiofrequency microneedling or even clinical grade skincare that requires prescription. These things require medical recommendations, and it has to be dispensed under a scope of practice or scope of medicine. So they're medical treatments.
Yeah.
And so social media has opened that Pandora's box to, number one, putting too much information out there, because now we're allowing patients to walk in our doors and tell us what they're getting, to, again, just seeing a side of medicine that isn't necessary.
Yeah. Social Practice would love to offer your practice a free social media audit. Visit us on social media at Social Practice US. Click the link in our bio to claim your free audit today. I'm thinking about providers in this instance, because I can only imagine having patients coming through and they see 8, 10, 15 patients a day, maybe more.
Right.
And patients coming in, they're like, I want to look like this and I want you to do this on me. And this is what I want. And I'm not, really kind of closed off to being consulted in the process. And providers are just naturally more empathetic in nature. I mean, they want to take care of their patients. They want to just be there to help them achieve the ultimate outcome, the result that they're going for. But it can be a hard conversation. Do you have any advice for providers who are getting those questions of, I want to look just like Lindsay Lohan, or I want to look just like this, or they think they know exactly what they want, but they need something either slightly different or completely different. Do you have any tips on how to have that conversation?
Yeah, I think own your expertise. Know who you are as a provider. Be okay with saying no. Yeah. And when you own your expertise and you're confident in your recommendations, you're not bowing down to what a patient says they want. Yeah. You're giving them options. I understand that you want to look like this, and I'm not sure we can achieve that, at least in one session today, but let's make you the closest version of what is best for you.
Yeah.
But I think that really understanding patient goals and owning your expertise and really, really being confident in how to confidently and compliantly practice medicine.
Yeah.
Whether you're an esthetician, an injector, or a surgeon, you have to be confident in your scope of practice and what you can do in your skill set. I find that providers that aren't as confident are the ones that typically say, oh, okay, we're going to do that. Not, let me tell you why what we're going to do is going to be better for you and you're going to love the outcome even more.
Yeah.
So just really changing how you present treatment plans and how you consult with your patients is really important.
And just kind of to wrap up the conversation on social media, how can a provider or practice set themselves up for success, especially with these types of conversations with their patients through social media? Like, do you have any recommendations on things they need to be talking about?
Absolutely. So as much as social media can be kind of the thorn in our side with some of these other topics, it is also probably one of the best things that ever happened to our industry. Remember, aesthetic treatments used to be taboo, and now it's okay to make yourself feel better, enhance what you're uncomfortable about. As a matter of fact, there's a staggering stat out there that over 70% of women consider aesthetic treatments an investment in their professional career. It's no longer just to make me feel good, but it's making me confident, it's making me perform. I'm putting myself on stage or on some type of platform. So that being said, that's what you want to attract. Educational content, first thing they need to do is partner with someone like Social Practice, because nobody should be trying to do it all on themselves, at least understanding the strategy. I think the big miss for practices is there's no strategy, right? You have to have strategy. You know more than I do. Everything you do is intentional, but educational content, and really speaking to your patients about who you are, why you do the treatments that you do, and kind of that persona, you're attracting the patients that you want in your practice. So I think strategy is so important, and really being educational. That's what they want. They don't care how well you get down, like on the TikTok videos dancing. They don't care. Like some of that kind of stuff is fun, right? Like it gives them the opportunity to see inside the practice, but consumers want information, and they choose practices based on information.
Yeah, that's so good. And that's another tip that I typically give practices is think about what are the most common questions you're getting right now? What are the most common objections you're getting when you're presenting a treatment plan? Because those are the things that your audience needs to be educated on and they need to understand more about, so that by the time they get into the patient chair, they have that knowledge because you've been sharing it on your socials, and they're empowered and equipped to make a better decision on the treatment plan that they want to move forward with. So I agree with you, educational content, and also patient outcomes, patient stories, of course.
Social proof, right?
Before and afters are so important, because we want to go and find somebody on your page that we're like, okay, that's exactly what I'm wanting, and this doctor or this provider can get me that. And that trending audio too, sprinkle it in. It still is important and relevant. It's not, I never advise that that's the main strategy. Yeah. I think that we need to just incorporate it in as part of the overall content mix. But the trending audio is what's interesting, is that type of content gets in front of more people who don't currently follow you. So we see on average about 70 to 80% of the viewers of the trending audio are non-followers of our clients, and then about 20% are current followers. So it is a great way to get in front of new eyeballs using the trending audio. But I really am just so grateful that you came in today to share more of your knowledge and expertise.
Thank you for having me.
And I would love for you to share with the audience, how can they find you? How can they follow you, keep up with you?
Yeah, so my social media is not the greatest. So aestheticpracticepartners.com is my website. Of course, you can find us on social media, Aesthetic Practice Partners. My personal page is Kara_McClanahan_APP. You can Google me. There's lots of great videos out there.
I love it.
Social, practice management assets and resources. I do a lot of speaking at conferences. So I'm easy to find.
Yeah.
And so lots of different ways.
And don't you have a practice assessment that you offer?
I do. Okay. So we do, we always offer a virtual practice assessment for practices that don't quite know where to go.
Yeah.
And a complimentary 90-minute strategy session just to understand where they're at. Because sometimes just getting little bits and pieces help you kind of make the decision of what you need to do.
Absolutely.
And bring clarity. So we always offer a complimentary 90-minute business strategy practice discovery call.
I love it.
Which can be booked through our website.
Yeah, and you guys, just to wrap this up, this is the time to talk to someone like Kara, because, you know, I've been hearing some feedback of practices who, some of them are hitting that ceiling of, you know, we've been busy, but we're kind of plateauing. Now's the time to be proactive and partner with businesses like Kara's, or even just do the 90-minute assessment, get a pulse check of where you're at so that you can plan ahead for 2026.
Absolutely.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in today. We'll see you next time. You can find us on social media at the Aesthetic Edit Podcast. We are on all podcast platforms, so don't forget to hit subscribe. We would absolutely love it if you would take a moment to leave us a review. 5-star reviews help us shape future episodes on the podcast and offer the guidance you need in the aesthetic space. To follow Social Practice on social media, you can find us at Social Practice US on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok.